Thank you so much for joining us today. And again, let me apologize for the audio issues that we had earlier, but let's get started. Even cosmetic practices need a facelift now and then. And I have started my career in 1993, so I have been working with cosmetic practices really for about 30 years. And I just recently merged with Page One Solutions, so I'm very proud to be part of their management team. And the presentation you're about to see is reflective of their great work and the work that we're doing together. So when we look at how practices evolve, this happens to be one of my very favorite practices that we've worked together since 2010, Renaissance Plastic Surgery, actually out of St. Charles, Missouri. And you can see what the evolution has been. Neither of these sites were mobile, although the shift to mobile actually started in 2007. But this is how we looked in 2010, and then we updated the site in 2013. And then you can see that in 2015, only 3 years later, we relaunched their new site, which of course was now mobile. But nonetheless, when a practice is really current and growing as this practice does, it's so important for them to stay relevant. And when we start looking at what do they look like today, it's now another few years, and this is what they look like today. So in 2019, we will launch their new site with quite a different look and feel, very current and very with it. But what influences the changes that we must make in order to be forward thinking? You can see the difference from 2015 to 2019. It's really only 4 years. And so often practices will say to me, oh, I've already invested in my website. I really don't need to do anything more about it. That's a little bit like saying, well, I bought a car 20 years ago and it still gets me to where I want to come and go. But I think it's important for practices to understand that the website is really a reflection of your presence, of your savviness, of your understanding of beauty, of your understanding of the aesthetic consumer. So it really has to be current looking. So how does this come about? What is it that makes something current looking and something that doesn't look current? If we look at something just as simple as color, you can see that the following color studies were actually designed for Renaissance in 2015. And there are no wrong or right colors. However, there are rules that govern color, and a lot of people don't understand how really important this is. There actually is a world order for color. It's the International Color Authority, and it influences literally everything that we buy, from cars to car interiors, to paint color for our homes, fabric, furniture, I think I mentioned. It really governs absolutely everything that requires color. Ink for printing, all of those things are affected and are governed by an actual color authority. And colors are normally phased in and out over a 5-year period of time. So if we look at something like Renaissance, we can see that the colors that they chose for their site in 2014 are called neutrals. Well, what do neutrals look like in 2019? Or blue-green palettes in 2014, and what do those look like today? They're very similar, but you can see that there are very subtle differences in color, and whether something looks in or out of season has a great deal to do with the color. This also, of course, affects fashion. If we look at fashion in 2015 as compared to fashion for 2019, we can see that yes, they still look like beautiful models, but there are subtle differences in the lapels and in the color hues and in the length of things and the waistlines. These are all things that let us know that the photo on the right is more current than the photo on the left. Also affected by this would be photo images. These are photo images for 2015. This is what it looks like today. There's more ethnicity, hairstyles have changed. We can see that there are subtle differences, but there are certainly differences. Even advertising. I thought I would take something that most of you would recognize, Therapy. They do a beautiful job in their advertising, but look at the subtle difference between an ad that was run in 2014 as compared to one in 2018. Definitely their branding has remained the same, but the photo on the right looks more current than the photo on the left. This affects literally everything that we do for a practice. If you look at the e-blast series that we ran over 2016, they look great. They were fun. They were well attended. And they were opened, their open rates were very high and people were engaged. But as we go further into e-blast marketing, we can see that the size of the e-blast, how long it is, how thin it is, has changed. What you're looking at is sort of a whole series of things that we did for this practice in 2017. So the e-blast was sent for their holiday best featuring cool sculpting. Then came a poster for the reception desk, a very large banner pop-up, and then even their interior loop for their reception area had changed. Something as simple as an event. This particular practice has taken events to a whole new level. It's nothing for their events to generate $400,000, $500,000, $600,000. One of the last ones was almost $1 million in revenue over a week. But this was their 12th annual event, and there was a series of emails sent out, starting with the first one, and then sent out for about 4 weeks prior to their actual event. But look at the event today. Same fabulous event, but it's got a whole new fresh color look and a much more with it style look. Something as simple as billboards. These were billboards for 2015 and 2016, but look at what it looks like today for 2018. So what I'm saying is that everything is going to change with the facelift of the practice. Even the internal monitor. Here's their reception lobby loop. This is the before, and this is the after. Everything about this practice is now taking on this whole new current look for what their practice looks like today and what it's going to ultimately look like for 2019. When we look at what actually happens with practices across the country, I have two final results that I'd like to show you. This is a Rejuvenation MD, which is a med spa. Again, one of our very favorite practices. This is what their practice looked like in 2016. This practice has grown 50% year over year. So taking their great results, how well they treat their patients, how well they treat their staff, and giving it a fresh new look, you can see that the practice certainly looks more current this September than it did January of 2016. And then our last example would be on the opposite end of the country. This happens to be a Manhattan practice, a practice that we've worked with since January of 2014. And this is what their practice looked like when we started. And then by 2016, we had given them a whole new look. They had such tremendous growth. We added a second website to a region close by, and this was launched in January of 2018. So subtle differences, but nonetheless, all of these practices have definitely had a facelift. So the fact is that in the absence of change, we start to look outdated and less relevant. So if you are interested in perhaps having a practice facelift going into 2019, then we'd love to see you in New Orleans at the FFAS Symposium. And again, I'm so sorry for our technical difficulty, but thank you for allowing me to at least submit my presentation. Thanks so much.
Juli Geldner, JD LLM, is the legal counsel and chief operating officer of the Geldner Center in Chicago and brings a wealth of knowledge and experience from the fields of practice management, malpractice prevention, and HIPAA compliance, among other things. Her presentation today is titled, How to Avoid a Medical Malpractice Lawsuit. Juli, I'm now passing the controls over to you. All right, Juli. Yep. Okay. Thank you for bearing with us, folks. We're going to have Juli present, and then we'll have Dana immediately after.
All right, I will. Sorry, just pull up my talk. I thought I had it up. Here we go.
Juli, you need to share your screen in the sharing tab.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
You have it?
Not
There.
yet. There we go. There we go. Good. All right. I'm going to let you go.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Tim, for the lovely introduction. My name is Julie Geldner. I'm an attorney in Chicago and also have my master's in law and healthcare, and I manage a cosmetic surgery practice in Chicago with 17 employees and 2 locations. Before I jumped into healthcare law, I was a medical malpractice defense lawyer for about 20 years. And that's where I come to this topic. So here we go. So basically, why are we talking about this? And we talk about this because it's huge in every physician's mind. Why? Because there's this fear um, in surgery, in plastic surgery, in facial aesthetic surgery, of what's going to happen if something goes wrong, or even if nothing goes wrong, and we have a patient who is just kind of whiny and complainy. And I think that everyone has seen that troubled patient that had expectations that were just off the chart. So, in the legal arena, we call it the medical malpractice lottery. And a number of plaintiffs, people who are going to sue you, go and file a lawsuit thinking they're going to win, whether on the merits of the claim or alternatively, they'll win because physicians tend to want to settle, because it being sued creates a lot of mental anguish and disruption in a physician's practice. So, it's really this gotcha mentality. And, do you feel like a winner today? Particularly when you have all of these review sites up, people get a little more aggressive. And I think part of that is they can do so anonymously. However, if they sue you, it really can't be very anonymous. But really, it's a patient mentality. It's a societal mentality, and basically, the patients often feel, maybe they won the Willy Wonka golden ticket, and they're lying in wait for something, even if it's just the smallest thing, to not go just right. And I'm sure each and every one of you have that fear somewhere in the back of your mind. So, what do you think might happen next? Well, yeah, I mean, if you have an issue with a patient, even if it's just a personality conflict, and the patient has a fabulous result, they can end up suing you. And you might think to yourself, well, how can that be? Who would take that case? Well, there are plenty of lawyers out there, unfortunately, who give the rest of us a bad name, that will go ahead and take the lawsuit and sue a physician, hoping the insurance company will just make it go away with a settlement. So here are some facts and figures about who gets sued and what the percentages are. This is pretty much the latest data, even though it is only 2005 data, from the New England Journal of Medicine. I did look at more recent publications, and all the data, the percentages remain about the same. So each year from 1990 to 2005, is a 15-year span, 7.4% of all physicians had a malpractice claim. So when you think about that, that's really not a very big percentage. But the worry in the back of your head probably is greater than 7.4%. Only 1.6% had a claim that led to paying out. 78% of the claims did not, and I emphasize not, result in payments to the claimant. So why is that? Before 1990, the insurance companies had a different theory of approach. And by insurance companies, I mean medical malpractice carriers. They just wanted to get rid of cases. So they created a mindset in the plaintiff's bar, in the lawyers that do the suing, that they can sue you for pretty much anything and you will get a nuisance value settlement. And what I mean by nuisance value is you'll get some small amount, and what's small is obviously subjective to the plaintiff themselves. But beginning in 1989, and really a full-blown change in practice in insurance companies' mindsets beginning in the 90s were that they were no longer going to pay nuisance values to get rid of claims, because what the data showed was that more claims were being filed and they were paying more, and a lot of it was just to get a quick payout. So that trend has ended with medical malpractice carriers. And you may also notice in your premiums that they're not skyrocketing as much as they were in the 80s. There's a much lower percentage of increase in your premiums. And some of them have remained static over the last 4 or 5 years. So when you look at this next slide, the types of physicians with malpractice claims annually, you'll see the blue is any claim at all. And you can see the top ones, plastic surgery. And with that, I will include any cosmetic surgery, whether it's facial aesthetics, general plastics, oculoplastic. The any claim mark, it's the fourth largest number of claims, but even at that, it's in a low percentage, and that's the good news. So CBS News had a report in 2016 that reported the percentage of facial plastic and general plastic surgeons who faced a medical malpractice claim was down to 12.7%, or up to 12.7%. It's hard to know if that number is accurate or not, because when I went back to the news report, they really didn't cite any, they didn't cite your societies, they didn't cite any journals. So, that number is variable, but it still is less than one might think. So then you have to go back and ask, well, why would I get sued? Why me? And I hope I don't offend any of you with this, but the number one reason doctors get sued is because you're this guy. You're sort of short with your patients. You don't have a great attitude. You're tired. You're overworked. You're often undervalued by your patients. Your schedule is out of control. And so you always have an edge. You're always just not this person. And this person, this loving, communicative, kind doctor, who puts on their happy professional face each time they meet a patient, they get sued a lot less often. So, the real lesson is, when you have a patient interaction, the rule of thumb is just be nice. Patients who like you are much less likely to sue you, even if they have a legitimate claim. If you have a relationship with them, if you've established a patient-physician relationship, and it's one based on mutual respect and appreciation, you've shown kindness, your staff has shown kindness and care, patients much less likely to sue you. So why else do you get sued? Well, you're either a smarty or you're a dum-dum. So in my office, I keep 2 bowls of candy. One bowl is a bowl of Smarties, and one bowl is, those little dum-dum suckers. And when staff comes into my office, for whatever reason, they generally leave the office with either a pack of Smarties or a Dum Dum lollipop. And, because I like people to know when they're behaving well, when they're working well, and when they're not working so well and not behaving so well, and their interactions could use some help. So you have to decide, are you going to be a Smartie or are you going to be a Dum Dum? And I think just those bowls sitting on my desk are a reminder to both our medical staff and our administrative staff, and about who do you want to be today. Anyway, moving on, the main reasons cosmetic surgeons get sued is they have weak medical records. You have to take the time to do it correctly. It'll save you so many headaches later. You have to chart. You have to chart thoroughly. You have to chart correctly, and you have to sign it. Another reason is inadequate patient history. You really can't consider, when determining what protocol, what operation to proceed with a patient, if you don't know what has gone on with them physically or mentally, or what is going on with them physically or mentally. You have to ask the questions. Oftentimes, patients are poor historians, and unless it's pried out of them, they're not going to tell you. Another reason is inattentive or poor patient follow-up. Patients have to feel the love just as much post-operatively in their follow-up care as they do in their consultations and their preoperative visits. That follow-up care is equally, if not more important. Also, overlooked lab studies. You have to look at them. You have to sign them when you see them. One of the bigger problems these days is informed consent was not obtained. Now, you really have to do a true informed consent. The courts are coming down harder and harder on doctors who give a flim-flam informed consent. You actually have to discuss the risks of treatments and the elements, all of the elements of informed consent have to be explained and properly documented. One of the important things that you have to document and talk about is that the patient was informed that they don't have to have the surgery, that they can refuse this surgery. It is not life or death. You have to discuss that the patient has the option not to have the surgery. Many physicians don't want to scare their patients away from having the surgery with a very robust informed consent, but I can tell you, if you don't do that, you might end up with a big headache in the end. Medication problems can cause lawsuits, communication problems, miscommunication with other treating physicians, referring or consulting physicians, or even within your own office. A big one is also weak patient education. That really feeds back into the informed consent. If you don't have a patient who's informed about what's going to happen, how they need to follow up, and very importantly, what to expect as a result, the patient is more likely to litigate. So now we return to this offender, our favorite guy here giving us the finger. Inattention to the importance of a sound doctor-patient relationship is really a problem. You have to have a good rapport with your patient. You have to have a wonderful telephone etiquette with your staff. You have to Try to eliminate excessive or unexplained waiting times. Rudeness by physician or staff, that'll get you every time. Or if the patient deems that you are not listening or hearing them, poor communication skills can get you sued pretty often. So what do you do now? You get sued, what do? Well, the first thing you do is you call your carrier. You don't call your husband, your wife, your other. You don't see your next patient. You go right to the phone and call your carrier. And what are they going to do for you? They're going to lawyer up. So here's what you need to do. If you know a good medical malpractice defense lawyer, when you call your carrier, request that attorney immediately. And by request, I don't really mean ask nicely. I mean, you need to insist on the attorney you want if you have a preference. Each carrier has a book of attorneys that they work with, or a book of firms they work with. Ask to see it. Ask to email. Ask the carrier to email that list to you. You might be surprised who you know on there. Or your friends may know someone on there. Next, you'll be asked to secure all of your records. And by all, I mean every last piece of paper, photograph, etc. that needs to be, if you have EMR, it all needs to be printed out, moved, and put under lock and key. You need a hard copy stored in case your EMR explodes for some unknown reason. You need to have a physical copy of those put away and locked up.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is TK Crowe. Most of you probably know my mother, Candace Crowe. I've been working on and off for Candace Crowe Design my entire life, but I first fell in love with email marketing back in the 90s. Back then, my mom had no regard for child labor laws, so she used to use me and my 3 brothers all the time to stuff envelopes for direct mail campaigns. So, Julie, I might have to reach out to you later for some back wages. But we used to do a lot of direct mail, and then in the 90s, me and my brothers found out that we could reach the same audience or a similar size audience by clicking a few buttons and sending some emails. So pretty much since then, I've been in love with it. My hope today is that if you're not doing email marketing, that you get a solid understanding of best practices for it and a few key takeaways to get started. And if you are doing email marketing, I hope that you find a couple of insights that help take your email marketing to the next level. So it seems like every day there's a new marketing channel popping up. I mean, I could probably list off 10 to 20 right now. So why do I still so strongly believe in email marketing? Well, there's several reasons. The first one being that, your email list is a physical asset of your company, of your practice. Google, Facebook, all the social medias are going to change the way they deliver content. So it's going to affect how users find you on those sources. But that email list, even if you're only getting 20% open rate, that is 20% of your list that you can contact, with the press of a button every single time you press that button. So that's huge. And another reason is that email is still ubiquitous with the internet. And by that, I mean, it's the gateway to pretty much every property on the internet. What do you use when you sign up for online banking? Your email address. How do you converse with your patients to a large degree? It's going to be email. So knowing that is really one of the reasons why I still so strongly believe in it and support it. And even usage statistics for email show that it still far outflanks Facebook, Instagram, and all the others. But with every positive of email, there is a downside, and one of the biggest is that over 75% of messages that are sent via email are spam. So this is where the need for best practices come in, and I like to think of best practices as kind of a starting point to give you the tools and the strategies to start your email marketing journey, but they're kind of the starting point so that as you're moving forward and testing things, you learn more and you can do more. So before I get every talk about email marketing, I like to talk about the core of it, the heart. And the thing that separates email marketing from a lot of the other channels is this idea of permission. Email is the one channel where the subscribers, the users of email, actually give explicit permission to brands, to practices to send them marketing messages. And this separates it from every other marketing channel. The next is expectations. And when subscribers give you that permission, there is an expectation that is set about the frequency of the messages that will be sent, the types of messages. And lastly is trust. And trust is huge online. If you're following the news, you know that Google just released a report about a data hack in, I think it was back in 2015 that was open for 2 years, and trust is huge. And I think that just illustrates the importance of trust and how easily broken it is. So once you get that permission from your subscribers, it's incredibly important that you maintain, your sending frequency and the respect through the expectations that are set. Now, before I get into best practices, I want to talk about the needs of the subscriber. And I like to think of these 4 things as a target. You don't always hit every single one of them, but at a bare minimum, you should always be trying to be respectful. And that goes back to the expectations. Then you want to be functional. People are checking their email on all sorts of devices now. So you want to make sure that your email functions on an iPhone, on an Android, on a tablet, and a desktop. And when you're sending functional and respectful emails, you're increasing the likelihood that the email that you sent is going to be valuable. And that means that the information adds value to the user's life. The special offers is something that they're actually interested in. And then when you're, at the summit of subscriber needs, you're sending them remarkable emails. And these are the types of emails that subscribers share with their friends, they share with their family, they forward to their mom about the special deal on Botox or whatever it is. And those are the gold standard of emails. Those are what we're always striving for, but we have to make sure that we're sending respectful, functional, and valuable emails in order to have a chance of sending something remarkable. Just a quick note on the law here in the United States. We have some of the most lax privacy laws in the world. We're probably 5 to 10 years behind Europe and Canada, but we need to understand that at a bare minimum, following the CAN-SPAM Act in the United States is not going to prevent spam complaints. We need to do more than that. We need to honor the expectations that we've set and be respectful in our sending of messages. So now I'm going to get into best practices. The first, and in my opinion, the most important, is to constantly be building your list. It is estimated that about 30% of subscribers on a list are either going to become inactive or unsubscribe over a year. 30%. So we need to be constantly collecting email addresses, whether it's from the patients in your practice or through your website or social media channels. We need to focus on list growth, because if we don't have a list, we have no one to send an email to. Next is about the sign-up process, and we want to make signing up as simple and straightforward as possible. If you're collecting emails from your website, it should be clear and obvious within fractions of a second how they sign up, what information they put in, and a very, very brief description of the expectations that are set through that are trying to be set through that sign-up process. And again, with email, it's so much about conditioning your subscribers to receive messages, once a month, twice a month, or once a week. And the starting point for that is the sign-up process. There are a couple of different ways of growing your list. The one that is most straightforward and simple is what's called double opt-in. And this is where when a subscriber gets added to your list through your website, they get sent a confirmation email that has them click a link to confirm their subscription to your email list. This is, in most cases, this is the gold standard for confirming new subscribes. but it isn't always necessary, and there are other options. And if you want to learn more about those, ask me some questions after. But the most easy and straightforward is to use the double opt-in process. This does lower list growth a little bit, but what happens is you're actually adding, on average, more high-value subscribers. Now, the welcome message is something that comes as soon as someone subscribes to your email, and this is a must. Studies show that the welcome message gets 50% more engagement than any of your other messages, and then users that open the welcome message are engage with your future content 30% more. So this is a quick and easy win. It's an automated message that goes out, and it can be set up very simply through your email service provider. If you want to take the welcome message to another level, develop a welcome campaign. And this is where you develop a series of usually 4 to 6 emails that get sent out in the first 10 to 14 days of a subscriber's lifespan. And this really, deepens the you send more brand information, deepen the relationship between that subscriber and your brand. You try to collect more information about the subscribers so that you can send more targeted emails. And this is just another step after the welcome message that really deepens the engagement with your subscribers. Now, something I hear all the time is like, oh, I only got a 17% open rate, or only got 15%. The thing about email marketing is that every single time you send out an email, it creates an impression in the subscriber's mind, whether or not they open it. So we want to be very cognizant of envelope content. This means the from address, the subject line, the time and the day that we send. Just because they don't open your email doesn't mean that it's not creating an impression. So we want to use descriptive from address that really speaks to your brand, so that they get used to that idea of getting email messages from your brand. Subject lines, generally speaking, I think this is pretty common knowledge, they should be shorter, but the thing that you really want to do is make them as relevant as possible. So I would say I believe that a relevant subject line is more important than a short subject line. When subject lines are short, quite often what happens is that there's a disconnect between the subject line and the content of the email. So you'll see a high open rate, but then you'll see a really low click-through rate. So we want to make them as relevant as possible. And again, this goes back to being functional. Because of all of the devices and all the devices that are coming out, we have to always test our emails and see what they look like on a wide variety of devices before we send them out to our entire audience. And this can be done in most email service providers. Now, when you're writing content to your emails, even for your blog posts or social media posts, you want to use a personal voice. You want to use words like I and you and we. Gone are the days of the big brand corporate voice. So we want to be very personal in our emails. Even picture your ideal patient or a patient that you really like, and just write to them when you write. People don't read this on the internet the same as they do, in a book. So we want to balance the use of images, text, headline, bolded text, bullet points, to really make our emails as skimmable as possible, so that a reader can get through your email in a couple of seconds and really get the main points and the main call to action. Every single email that you send should have a clear call to action. And there doesn't have to be just one, but there should always be some action, whether it's clicking over to your website, clicking to call to set up an appointment, clicking to respond to an email, RSVPing for an event. There should always be some action that you're trying to get users to take when you send them an email. There should be a goal. I get asked a lot, how often should I send? And the answer is as often as you can add value to people's lives. And I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but if all you're doing is sending special style emails out to your subscribers, you're really undervaluing your brand and what you're offering to the people that are coming in to see you every day and that are signing up for your list. Because, you know, at a very core level, you're helping people feel better about themselves. And there is a wide range of content that can be developed around that and sent out to add value to your subscribers' lives. So don't just send out specials. You know, I like to use the 3-to-1 to 4-to-1 ratio when sending out, you know, brand awareness value content versus selling. But on a bare minimum, you should be splitting up your specials with some kind of value added content. A great tactic to use to kind of figure out what content works best with audiences is to test it on other channels. You know, Facebook, Instagram, those are great channels to really figure out what types of images work with your audience, as well as what types of copy or words work. And you can get pretty instantaneous feedback on those channels, and then use that information to dictate what types of images and copy to use in your emails. I'm almost running out of time here. I'm going to try to finish up real quick. As you go through your email journey and you develop subscriber profiles, and even if you're just exporting lists from your EMR, there's a ton of data that you can pull in regards to what types of procedures they've had, what types of procedures they're interested in, and then you can send highly targeted messages to those users using personalization and other things to really get them to engage and come back for more procedures and things like that. And this is something that, you know, as you're going through your email journey, you want to really aim for sending more and more personalized messages. Another thing is, and this goes back to conditioning, you want to try to condition your users to expect an email from you on a certain day and time. So try to send consistently on that day and time, but also test what days, you know, send emails on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, different times. Figure out what day users are most receptive to receiving your emails, and then stick to that day. To prevent any errors, always develop a pre-send checklist, including making sure what list you're sending to, and